Edinburgh Reel is sponsored by Total Health, one of the UK's leading wellbeing organisations committed to helping individuals, athletes and businesses build health and performance.
This is Edinburgh Reel, a show dedicated to delivering compelling conversations with fascinating people. I'm Elliot Reeves and I'm joined by my co-host Craig Alley, who is founder of Total Health, one of the UK's leading health and wellbeing organisations committed to helping individuals, world-class athletes and corporations build health and performance. Today's guest is Tabi Jayne. Tabi is founder and CEO of Earthself, an organisation which aims to redefine the way the world does business with a nature-centred approach to organisational management. You are also recently the founder of the podcast Sustainable. You're an author. You have a degree in psychology, a master's in applied ecopsychology, you're a member of the British Psychological Society, and you're a certified professional coach. That's quite a resume.
It is a bit of a resume when you say it like that, yes.
Tabi, it's an absolute pleasure to have you here. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here with both of you.
Thank you so much. So it would be great if we could, I suppose, set the scene and if you could tell us a bit about your background and where you grew up, what growing up was essentially like for you.
So I am a country girl by heart. I have always grown up in small villages, which was kind of a contrast, having nature outside, because I mean, my childhood wasn't particularly pleasant. I mean, I grew up in a house filled with domestic abuse, was impacted with that as well. Had a lot of bullying at school, which I think was probably a tied-in consequence of that. A lot of ill health as well. So childhood wasn't particularly pleasant for me. And the thing that I enjoyed most was either reading books or being outside in nature, which you can already see is kind of setting the scene for where we're going with this.
Yeah. Definitely. So I read some excerpts from one of the books that you had written actually, and it does speak about sort of traumatic events that you had, one of them in particular being the loss of your brother.
Yeah.
And I suppose how that's kind of shaped you. So I mean, if you can tell us a bit about that event and really how that had an impact on you at that time.
Yeah, well, my brother was 17 when he died, and he crashed his car after coming back from a night out in Glasgow. I was 22 at the time, and I think after the traumatic childhood that I'd used a lot of drugs and alcohol as a way to escape from all those negative emotions that I really didn't want to address. And when Peter died, it was really funny, because it's almost as if all of this abuse had shut me down and I actually didn't know what love was. Okay. And when Peter died, the first thing that I can really remember is, oh my God, I loved him. And the depth of that, I mean, it was really bizarre, because it was actually a transformative experience, because in the first 6 weeks, all I felt was this love for my brother. So I mean, I couldn't relate to what was going on with everybody else in terms of they were grieving and they were like, oh my goodness, he's dead, because I felt this connection still there with him. I felt this love. I mean, it didn't last. And obviously once that wore off, then what I did, because you can read the stories and you can go, well, people with traumatic pasts, there's all sorts of negative things that can happen, you know, side effects of health, psychological trauma and everything else. And I didn't want anybody to be able to turn around and say, well, her brother's death was the reason that she's messed up. Because I mean, I had perceived myself as very messed up anyway, because I mean, I knew what was going on inside my head. And my brother was a troublemaker anyway. I mean, he was not your great boy. I mean, I've got some great stories, but they're all involving setting up extortion rings at school, or buying tobacco, because he was so tall, buying tobacco and setting up a tobacco business for all the kids who wanted to smoke. You know, I mean, he took a lot of drugs, you know, erred on the wrong side of the law and whatever else, but at the end of the day, despite all those things, he was still my brother and I loved him. And I suppose that was my driving motivation behind his death. I also wanted it to mean something, because I mean, with grief there's a meaning making process that comes afterwards, and for me I didn't want my brother's death just to be the sad story of a 17-year-old boy who'd crashed his car and never made it home. Teenage statistic of a boy driver. So for me, I wanted to do something to show how special he was, because, well, I mean, he was special to me, but I wanted to create a story or a meaning around his death that would inspire me and allow me to grow and give his death meaning, because, as I said, I just couldn't accept that he died for nothing. And I think that was the underlying thing. So what could I do with my own life? How could I make meaning from my life that would give it greater depth? And how could I suppose, live for both of us as well?
Very inspiring.
And so that would have been around presumably 2002, is that
2002.
Right? And that was the point at which you set up the Pedro project?
That was set up in 2003.
Okay.
So that was my first initial motivation to do something, to want to help others. Which I think it ran for 6 years, but again, that I had a story running where, because this was my brother, I didn't want to take any money for it, so I set it up, I was running it, and I mean, it did quite well. I got nominated and was a finalist in a few awards and stuff, but I was working to support myself, and I went back to university after 2 years, so I mean, I was literally doing crazy workaholic hours.
What were you doing when your brother died? Were you studying at that point?
I was studying, and I ended up having to take 2 years out of university, because I mean, I literally couldn't focus after his death, because once it wore off and once I really went into the really yucky feelings that are brought up, because I mean, there's all, you know, so much complexity, and then a lot of it, because I mean, I blocked out a lot of my childhood. So when people were talking about, you know, especially like my mum and my sister, oh, do you remember this and do you remember this? And I thought, I actually can't remember anything, because I've literally just put up a black door against it. So I ripped off the plaster. You know, and I mean, it was very destructive, because there was a lot of like self-harming behaviours and everything. My lowest point, I ended up spending 3 days in a psychiatric hospital after doing a Britney Spears and shaving my hair off. My only consolation is I did it first, so she copied me.
Okay, jeez. So I mean, it says that you were featured in national TV documentary, you were in newspapers, you had magazine coverage, you know, you were finalist for a number of high-profile awards, but I read that you had said that you just didn't manage to kind of connect or enjoy any of that, because you had this perhaps inner narrative that you were never good enough, or it just, you know,
yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I have jokingly turned around and said that I am a overachiever with an inferiority complex, but I'm in recovery, thankfully. And it's always, I think, when we do anything, we have a vision of what it wants to be, and we're very good at getting caught up in what we think things should be like, rather than accepting and celebrating all the successes that we're having along the way. Because I mean, I didn't perceive, and I'm sure when we go further down the line, I still don't perceive that I do a lot, that I do much. And you can see from the introduction that there's a bit of a contradiction between that, that perception.
When you hear
and
that
story.
introduction and all that list is reeled off, does that then bring it home to you, or do you still think you're lagging it and slacking?
I know how much I don't do, so sometimes I perceive myself. I know it. I perceive myself to be slacking, but as a friend said to me, I love your days when you don't do anything, because you work for about 4 hours and so productive. It does bring it home, but I think it's because as well I also have a big vision about what I want to achieve. Like if we say I've got 100% of a big vision and this is where I want to be, I still only perceive that I'm sitting at like 2, 3, 4% of where I want to go. And sometimes it's hard to kind of bring it back and go, well, wait a minute, look how much you've already achieved. Yeah. But again, I didn't expect there to be so much work as well involved in everything that I'm doing. And you set and you want to do something that's like, oh, so before I can get to that point, I need to do this, and then I can get to that. So it's not this A to B linear path.
And do you think the pursuit of goals is something that you do in order to distract yourself from connecting to emotions, or?
Had you asked me that question 6 months ago, I would have given you a different answer. But my granddad died just in October.
Okay.
So I have just gone through the whole distraction of emotions, which my skin, because I have eczema when I have emotional stress, it kind of flared up a bit, and I was like, oh, what is this? Because, I mean, my granddad was 88, he had Alzheimer's. I'm completely happy that he's gone. What I wasn't prepared for was the little bit of, well, apart from my brother dying, I was preparing for my granddad's death when my brother died, because that was my logical path. Well, my granddad's old, then my brother died. So I'd done all this work on what would happen if my granddad died, and he, well, he's the last figure that I grew up, male figure that I grew up with. So there's actually no man that knows me since a child, which for whatever reason, that's quite emotional for me. And I did use goals as a way of distracting myself, and I went into let's not feel and acknowledge, because I don't want to take, you know, and I did work, but I also wanted to keep on going. So the goals started to come out, because really I didn't want to acknowledge you know, that, I suppose, loss of safety that I felt after he died.
It must be a real loss of or lack of security, I'm sure, is, you know, with your, because that's what traditionally your male figures will bring into your life, won't they? So, but it seems like you put out quite big goals, so there must be a lot of energy in there. You know, you don't just say, right, I'm going to run a marathon in 6 months. You know, it's like, I'm going to set up 7 companies and take over the world. So there's obviously a lot of energy behind that, you know, to think that big. But you pull it off as well. So how do you keep yourself going at that level?
By feeling that I do nothing, which is kind of like this paradox, because, and I suppose I will take time out, I will go to nature. I've been a little bit not as in nature as much as I could have been, but then I went internal, and what I find is when I'm not feeling safe, I hide under bed covers, because that's the best place to be when you don't feel safe. But I take a lot of time for myself. But then I perceive that as work, because that's that inner work. So I'm looking at, well, what do I need to process? What do I need to let go of? What's this deep inner process? What are the limiting beliefs? What's the crap, as I call it, the human crap that is there that's stopping me from achieving stuff? So I spend a lot of time looking and working on that.
Do you do that personally, or do you have people helping you to work through that?
I mean, I'm lucky I've got some friends that I will talk stuff through. I have in the past. I mean, I'm a great fan of getting support, and I've looked for different support as and when I need it. What I've also found as well is that a lot of the time that if I've gone to work with coaches, or especially intuitive healers, I'm teaching them what I need, because I'm boosting their skills up to give me what I want. So a lot of the time it is very much, how do you go out into nature, and how do I intuitively do what I need to do. But I'll pick up. I mean, I've read a lot. I mean, I'm an avid reader, and I would read about 3 or 4 books a night as a child. So
there's a lot of reading.
There's a lot of books in my head. Yeah.
It's good IP though.
And so, do you find by going into nature, your intuition kicks in a little bit, and what's ingrained in your head, all that information that you've read and all that info that you've picked up, you've obviously looked at a lot of information. Do you think by going into nature and you stop doing and thinking almost that it starts coming out? Is that why you go to it?
Yeah, and I mean, this ties into a part of, like, a key part of the nature process, because when you go out into nature and you become present and aware, you're dropping your brain state into a different brain state. So our normal brain state, when we've got all that stress and worry and whatever else, is our beta brainwave state. The alpha brainwave state is the meditation state, where you're calm, you're alert, and you're open. And what I've found almost by surprise, because I certainly wasn't looking for it, that when you go and you spend a lot of time outside in nature and you're really focusing on the sensory information coming in, you're able to move into that deeper theta brainwave state, which is where there's complete silence. And I thought everybody had complete silence in their head when they went outside, until I started speaking to people and then found that they didn't have complete silence. And I thought, oh, what is this? But from that place of silence, it's almost like slow motion. There's thoughts that arise, and I find that the thoughts that do arise are a far better quality than the 20 million that are happening when I'm in a better brainwave state.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Classic mindfulness, really, isn't it? It's the thoughts are still going to pop up, but you're getting yourself into the right state to observe the thoughts and then see if you're going to run away with that thought and tell a little story off it, or you're just going to go, there's that little thought there.
There's
again,
that little thought, exactly. And I mean, what I do as well when I'm outside is, I mean, I use, and what I teach people to do is to use the natural world as an extension of yourself, you know, so it's not just your human self, you are actually an earth self, you know, we're all connected to the earth. So then it's looking at, well, if this is just me as well, what is the relationship that's going on between the thoughts and the emotions that I'm experiencing, as well as what's happening in the natural world. So when I think, oh my God, I really don't want to do that, for example, and a bird jumps out of the thing, what is that? And sometimes I don't have any idea, because it takes me a wee while to integrate that experience afterwards, but it's this dance between what's happening internally and what's happening externally that for me is a way of communication that really guides everything that I do, because I mean, that's what I teach with the nature process. That's why I set up my businesses. It's probably why I'm so ambitious, because everything that I get comes from this dynamic interplay, and it's important for me to practice what I preach and embody what I teach. I think that we are moving into a stage where we can't have people, I think people are becoming more perceptive to being lied to, and they can feel the lies. So you have to be able to come from this place of integrity and model what you're teaching. So that's kind of why I do everything in this dialogue with nature, and what am I getting, what am I being told, and how do I then go and apply it and do it.
Yeah, you said connecting to nature was your solace and salvation after the death of your brother. To someone that's as heavily left-brained as myself, I understand, you know, on a sort of philosophical level, that being in nature is kind of relaxing and whatnot, but the whole idea of it is still a bit kind of esoteric. So, I mean, what is it about being in nature, and how do you sort of connect, other than just simply being in the outdoors? Where is the deeper level of connection?
That's a very, very good question. And if we pull it back slightly left-brained for this precise moment and bring up a bit of research. So if we go into like Abraham Maslow talks about peak experiences, which are those experiences that take us beyond ourselves, can connect us to something more. Well, peak experiences most commonly happen out in nature. So there's all this research looking at, okay, the benefits of self-actualization improvement can come through this connection. But how does it happen? Because as you said, you can be out and it can be relaxing, you can look at it and it's beautiful. And for me, I mean, this was the moment, or the reason why I ended up doing my Master's in Applied Ecopsychology, because I didn't understand what I was doing that was different to other people. And the concept that I got taught, which I still teach because it's incredibly useful, is that we don't actually have 5 senses, we have 54 senses. So rather than just going out into nature and saying, I don't even know what the 5 senses are, but you know, whatever 5 senses, sight, sound, smell, whatever taste, rather than just going out with your 5 senses, what about opening up and becoming aware of these 54 senses? Now this takes you deeper into a present moment. So even here as we are talking, we've got the sense of distance going on between you and me. We've got the sense of light coming in from there. The sense of movement is you're nodding your head and I'm moving my hands. There's the sense of colour. I'm just trying to think, where else are we going with this? I mean, what other senses? because there's even internal ones. I mean, a sense of connection and community. So there's a sense of connection between us. Well, I'm feeling it, so I hope you guys are feeling it as well. So there's
we're here, man. We're here.
There's another sense going on there.
Well, what about your? What about the sense of like an undercurrent of thought and the emotions and stuff as well? How does that interact with that? You know, so you're saying nature is giving you all these signs, and nature is kind of there if we're engaging with it and we're open, we get ourselves into that state. But then what about when all that crap does come up and try and interfere with it? Does that blur the signals that we're getting from nature, or?
Yes, and there is research to back this up as well. Stephen Harold Booner is a herbalist and researcher. He wrote a book called Plant Intelligence. Now, he talks about sensory gating, that basically says that within our neurophysiology we have gates which can open up the information that we're receiving from the external environment, and we can process this information. What they've found by looking at this sensory gating in cases of post-traumatic stress disorder and, you know, traumatic events is that you find that the gates are open and people can't process and regulate. There's all this stuff going on. And having had my own experience of clearing out trauma over the last year and a half, I mean, for me, my connection with nature just totally dropped, and I was like, what's happened? I can't decipher anything because there was so much going on within the body. Because, I mean, we have to remember that we don't have a mind and we don't have a body. The mind and the body are the same thing. And we have a sense of mind that's within the body. And when this is all out of whack, especially when we're tapping into withheld trauma, we're releasing it from the body as well, which means that there's all these sensations that are emerging which are not particularly pleasant and can be rather overwhelming. And when there's so much going on here, you can't focus outwards and be able to notice. So I mean, it is fascinating, because what I found with people when I teach them with the nature process, if people are going through trauma, there's only a small part of the process that I would do with them, because just being able to be present to nature and be in their body is hugely challenging for them, and that's all they're capable of doing. Going further and going, well, this is me out there. How can you think about, you know, or even use the nature around you as an extension of yourself when there's so much going on here?
Interesting.
So,
Okay. Yeah, it's very interesting. There's one thing that I wrote down earlier, which I think I'd quite like to sort of discuss and wonder if this is necessarily applicable, is Peter Sage, who I'm a big fan of his work. He has essentially four, I suppose, levels of consciousness that he talks about. I don't know if either of you are familiar, but he talks about essentially there's the to me mentality, so to speak, which is like victim mode, like everything's happening to me. There's the by me mentality, which is like I'm going to go out and make things happen. If it's going to happen by me. It's like setting goals and doing that stuff. But often that'll mean kind of swimming against the current and trying to force things to happen. The next level is like through me. So that's essentially living in a state of flow, allowing things to happen. When the river goes left, go left with it, in the knowledge that something better is coming. And then there's the as me mentality, which is like this entire connectedness or a oneness. So, I mean, is that something that, have you experienced that level of connection being in nature?
Many times.
Okay.
So, I mean, I very much relate to I get the as me is going with the river. That's when I step out. That's like out of flow for me, because this whole notion of oneness and being, I mean, it's very difficult for me to articulate. I still don't have the language. I'm still trying to figure out how do I explain this feeling of exactly what you said there, this oneness and everything is me, and it's
exactly that.
Incredibly bizarre.
I've had little glimpses of it through meditation and mindfulness as well, and through sport. I think it's interesting. I've never heard of that kind of process explained like that, but I'm consciously trying to pull myself into through me.
Yes.
At the moment, to get into my flow, and I'm ditching a lot of things and have ditched a lot of things over the past year, so that I'm seeing something that just feels right, I'm going with it. And I'm going to ditch the thing that doesn't, even if it even if it's, I've put a bit of work into it, but I'm having to work at that. As me, I've felt some, I felt it a few months ago. Actually, I was up in Aberdeen for a full weekend of mindfulness, and it was like the end of day 2, and it was probably a 30-minute meditation. There was a point where there was just colour in front of me, just from, and it was probably for about 3 or 4 minutes. I think I was just fully in that, and I couldn't tell you what it was. I was tripping up my box, basically. I was in some crazy wee world, but what is it? But how do you explain that? What is it? Is it just me going a little bit, blinky-eyed, and it's creating all these colours and I'm really relaxed? Is it just that? Is it just a mind playing tricks with us, or have you just merged into the earth in front, into the environment in front of you? I don't know, but
yeah.
Okay, so I mean, we've got really deep really quickly here, which has been great. But I suppose we'll try and bring it back a bit more sort of on track and a bit more focused.
Back to left brain.
Engage left brain. So I think it was around 2008, you moved to Spain.
Yes.
Which was something that you'd always wanted to do when you were young.
No.
And is it not? No, seemingly this was a childhood dream that you wanted to learn another language, but maybe that's just...
it was a childhood dream that I wanted to learn another language.
Oh, so
but as a child, I thought Italy was far more sophisticated, or Greece.
Okay.
Like I had, and it's quite amusing to admit this, I had this stereotypical image of people from Spain being lazy and dirty, the stereotype, and the only reason that I moved to Spain is after my brother died, I saw this advert for, you could go and volunteer to speak English to Spanish people, you get your accommodation in a 4-star hotel paid for you. And I was at that stage where it was like, this is stuff that I always wanted to do, I'm learning to say yes. So I went out there and I had such a fantastic time, and I was like, God, I mean, the nature, I have never seen so much sun in my life. And it was like, wow, this is what the world looks like with sun. And it was so fantastic that I thought, I could do this. I could teach English. And this was part of me learning to move beyond the limiting beliefs that I'd had of thinking that I couldn't do stuff, learning to say yes and really trust myself. So I went and I did it. What made it also incredibly fascinating is that my brother's nickname was Pedro. So everywhere you go in Spain, it's Pedro, San Pedro, there's Pedro, Pedro that. So I went there, green was his favourite colour, everything was green. I saw Pedro everywhere. And for me, that was a sign that I should go. And even down to the fact that, I'm still chuckling because I remember this, I'm having that moment where you make a decision and like all the resistance and the stuff comes up and you're like, oh my God, am I doing the right thing? And you can feel it and you're like, shit, do I do this? Do I not do this? And I'd been on the computer and they had a web page for the company that said, do you want to come and live in Spain and whatever, teach English? I think that was a catch line. And I'm sitting there literally freaking out because I'm so scared because I'm moving to another country, don't know the language, everything. And all of a sudden the computer just randomly starts playing this page again and again, but it just pops up again. Do you want to go and live in Spain and teach English? Do you want to go and live in Spain and teach English? Do you want to go and live in Spain and teach English? And this went on like 5 or 6 times and I was like, okay, I get this. This is a sign that I need to go. So that is how I ended up in Spain. And it was a place that challenged a lot of stereotypes, not just about the country, but also about myself as well.
Definitely. And so how long were you there?
I was there off and on, I've been there off and on since 2007, because I think I was out there, or 2008, I think I came back the end of 2010. But by halfway through 2012, I was back out there. I think I came back here 2014. So, I mean, there's been a push and a pull where I can't get rid of the country. Not that I want to, because I absolutely adore the country, the language, the culture, everything.
Great. So the most recent thing I believe that you're doing is Earthself.
Yes.
And the Nature Project, and obviously the Sustainable Podcast. So maybe tell us a bit about what that work entails, and kind of share maybe people that you've worked with, etc. So
Earthself has kind of come from this expansion of my work, because when I first started out, I didn't know how you could use nature to do anything, and very much just went and did stuff to see what would happen. And what I realised as my work was developing is that there was this two distinct strands. There was the high level profile coaching that I was doing using another model, and then the nature process kind of came along and just went, I'm here. I was like, shit. Didn't quite know what to do with it. So the nature process it's very much a personal development tool using ecopsychological principles. How can you reduce stress and anxiety, boost productivity, creativity, inspiration, tap into that relationship with nature and really go deep into it and experience yourself in a different way. Earthself has emerged because as I was doing coaching work and I was working with entrepreneurs and mainly actually entrepreneurs starting out in business or NGOs, working with them using this coaching process, I really realised that if we take everything that I'd done, combining the charity and everything else, I really liked business, which surprised me because I went into a whole anti-business stage of I could never do business, and here I am. And it was a way of, as I started applying my work to my own business, as I saw it happening with entrepreneurs on a scale within their business, how it would work with activists, with individuals, writers, I realised the power and potential of it to actually take it beyond and move it more into formal organisational management. So again, would I say it was a left-brained logical reason? No. I went out and got the inspiration from nature and said, I mean, if we put it into simple terms, nature said to me, you're going to do this, and I went, okay. Which is very much a lot of my life. So you will see, because I didn't know what I was going to do. I mean, this is the Earthself logo on my hand.
Yeah,
so I got the tattoo after inspiration of being outside speaking to star, because I could be speaking to the star, I could be speaking to myself, I have no idea. Got this tattoo, and it was like this tattoo and another one on my arm. This is your business plan, go figure it out. I thought, okay, this is my business plan, like really, okay.
Is that the one you hand into the bank when you want a loan as well?
Well, this is it, you know, here's my business plan. Will you prove it? So, I mean, it took me about 6 months of tweaking out, okay, this is my business plan, what is this? And as I teased it out, I mean, this is why I'm doing so much, because it became really apparent that the nature process is evolving in its own direction as its own entity. I mean, it kind of took me by surprise, because the first year I ran the programme, I think there was like 77 people signed up. The following year there was about 107. We were donating money to a non-profit organisation that was supporting feminine empowerment and reforestation of the planet. In total 2 years, I think £16,000 was generated from that. And then about 6 weeks after the first one ended, this woman called Sammy, who's now my nature process master coach, she phoned me up and says, I'm doing a retreat in 6 weeks' time, it's 6 week time, and I want to teach the nature process. And I was like, okay, apparently I need to have facilitators for this. So none of it was this, I'm going to sit down and do a left-brained, linear, logical pattern. It kind of just happened and I went with it. I mean, I wrote the book and it snowballed from that. And so much so that I realised that needed to be a separate company, because everything, I was trying to do it all as one company before, and it was so confusing because everything speaks to different audiences. For example, with Earthself, going back to Earthself, that's very much more into the business side of things. How do you create a business that is nature-centred? How do you do the whole organisational management? I mean, what does nature-centred mean? How do you bring more of nature into your business so it's not just being inspired by nature, but also being driven by nature, thinking like nature? There's two other ones that I can't remember off the top of my head just now. But that speaks to a different audience, which is why even the sustainable podcast, because I mean, a lot of sustainability is how do we actually live in balance with nature. So a lot of the nature-centered principles, companies are already showing, but again, there's these small gaps of, well, some companies are doing some things, they're not doing other things. How do we create this dialogue and move it forward? So for me, the podcast was a way of being able to connect sustainability to a sense of place, because I think there's this big idea of what sustainability is. Lots of people are talking about it, but what does it actually mean?
Yeah.
Well, how about let's breaking it down? Let's have conversations with people who are doing sustainable practices, see what it means, check in with that and get this dialogue. And I started off just interviewing people in Scotland, so businesses in Scotland, because I wanted to showcase that there is so much going on that we're not aware of. And again, it's like if you want to listen to mainstream media, we're all going to hell in a handbasket and Donald Trump's going to be president. Alternatively, on the other side, there's all this really fantastic stuff happening, but it doesn't get as much press. So even within, I suppose, an environmentalist movement, there can be a sense of, we're doomed, we're not changing enough. Yet what I find is that there's so many people going ahead and doing stuff and just getting on with it, that if we can create more of a dialogue and see more of it in place, then we're able to actually make it not just this word, sustainability, what does it mean, but ground it into, well, this is what it means to do sustainable practice. So that comes in as part of Earthself, that's a project done by Earthself, to really offer an additional resource to companies, to businesses that want to be more sustainable, that want to be more nature-centred, so that they can start getting an idea of, well, what does that mean? How can I do it? Let's listen to the people that have already done stuff, and some people are doing some pretty cool stuff, which even I didn't know about. So it's a whole gap in my knowledge base that's been filled in by these interviews, and just creating more of this conversation. Because what I've found is, when I started my master's in applied ecopsychology, the mentor there was, we're all eco-zombies. We're all disconnected from nature, we're all destroying the planet, which was a really negative sense, and there's been a lot of that within the environmental movement. Conversely, on the other side, I'm more interested in, well, how are we already connected to nature, and how can we recognise this and enhance this? Because fundamentally we are a part of nature, so even the notion that we're disconnected is an illusion. So how can we look for the ways that people are already connected and showcase them, so that people can go, oh, I do that, because even with the nature process, what I've found is so many people have come up either to me, to Sammy, and turned around and says, oh, I've been doing this for years. I didn't know that this was a process. Well, all I've done really with the nature process is says, this is what happens when you go outside. Here's a language, here's a framework that you can understand it, so that then you can teach it to other people. So rather than, you're going back to your question, how do you become connected to nature? Well, this is how people do it. Go and have a look and make it simple and tease it out. And it works.
Can I ask two questions on sustainability then?
Yes.
When we knew you were coming here, I've got to ask about sustainability. So, there is, first of all, on an individual level, how extreme do we have to take it? Because you do, again, and this is probably just what you're seeing through media and Netflix documentaries and stuff, people who are really into sustainability, it is, they just go to, I'm living off the land, I'm cutting out technology and everything, and really isolating themselves away from this world that's going on around, and they say we all have to adopt this for us to actually save the planet. Is that true, or is that just extremism?
I would say it's extremism. Let's be realistic. We have an attraction to technology. So the idea of saying to everybody, let's go back and live in caves. I teach this nature stuff and I don't want to live in a cave. I kind of quite like my home comforts. So how do we merge technology and nature? And there's a great quote by Richard Louv, who wrote the Nature, Last Child in the Wood, where he talks about the nature deficit disorder in kids. He's also written a book called The Nature Principle, and he's got another one, I think, that's just come out. And he talks about how the future belongs to those businesses, to those people, to those leaders who are nature smart. And basically, the more technology we have, the more nature that we need. And when we learn to balance the two, that's what's going to take us to the next level. And for me, that's what I'm interested in. I mean, if I was living off the land with no internet access, I couldn't have a business. How could I travel to meet clients? And I like the thought of growing my own food, but I like it more if somebody else grows my own food for me and gives it to me. So how can we create this way that makes it work? Because it's not it's not sustainable
Yeah.
to go and live off the land, basically. So we're missing this fundamental point there. So it is that balance. And I think even with extremism, it's really good to, or it's really easy to guilt ourselves into thinking that we're not doing enough, that we're taking action, or we're not taking enough action. Well, we're all doing the best that we can.
Yeah.
We're all making these little changes. It's a process that takes time. It's not going to happen overnight. I mean, we're not just going to all of a sudden go, oh, there's no more oil. Ping! New world. We have to have this transition process. So how do we create that transition process? How do we make technology that's more in line with nature? I mean, that's the whole field of biomimicry, which is really emerging as a great science just now, which is like, how can we look to nature and get designs from nature to use it so that we create technology inspired by nature? And that, for me, I mean, that's a whole fascinating field when you look into stuff like that. So it is, for me, it's that balance between the two of them.
Which is really nice to hear, because someone on the outside, which is very unaware of it until this whole wave of popularity with it, when you do see the extreme people who are campaigning there, you're just like, I can't suddenly switch the life that I've got now to go into that. So what small steps can I make? It seems like there's none, and like you see, you fall into this negative cycle that you are doing nothing, and we're just all, the world's going to implode, you know, unless we go to that way of living. So my second question though is, how many generations is it going to take for this wave to really have an impact on the world, or do you think we're almost there?
Now that's a very good question. If we look at it from a left brain perspective and look at it quite logically, from what people have said within the oil and gas industry, we probably have about 50 years left of oil and gas. So we're not going to stop using it immediately to preserve that. We're going to figure out how do we need to make that transition. So for me, I would say, well, within the next 50 to 100 years, there is going to be a huge transition. We're not going to know what it is. And I suppose it depends, where is the end goal? Are we going to be in 100 years completely merged with technology and nature, living in a balanced way? Maybe not. It might take a bit longer than that. Are we going to be living in a future that is going to be remarkably different to the one that we're in just now? Well, yeah, without a doubt, because I mean, we only have to look at what's happening with the climate change and how the planet is basically saying, you've not listened to me, I'm going to take action, come on, I'm going to keep on causing havoc until you actually bring yourself back into balance. So I mean, I think we all know when we're making any changes within our own lives, it takes time. We never make as much changes as quickly as possible as what we like. So we just have to wait and see, really.
Yeah. Cool. So in terms of encouraging people to spend time in nature, how do businesses actually implement this without simply like relocating to a forest?
The thing is, you don't have to relocate to a forest unless you really want to. I mean, that would be a really cool office. But research shows that even just looking at pictures of nature can be beneficial. So I mean, it's really becoming nature aware, which is another part of being nature centered. And they did this really fascinating project in a prison in Oregon, where they were working with the prisoners in solitary confinement. And if you're in solitary confinement, you're locked in your cell 23 hours a day. You're only allowed out for an hour. And which for me is just the most horrific thing ever. But what they were doing in this hour out, they were letting them watch this half-hour, 40-minute nature film. It was just nature video on the walls of the area that they got to go and hang out in for an hour. And what they found is that this had such a dramatic effect upon the inmates' behaviour that they now were starting to use it as a preventative tool for aggression and hostile problems. So when the patients or the inmates are acting up, let's go and put the nature video on. So we can see that even just that video or that picture can fundamentally make a difference. Wow. And it's things that I say to people, well, can you put a screensaver of nature on your phone, so every time you look at your phone it's got a natural backdrop? Can you put pictures on your wall? There's things like naturescapes where people are bringing plant sounds and I actually went, it was Amsterdam Airport, and they've done this. This was phenomenal because it wasn't there 10 years ago. They have bird sounds and running water, and they've got fake trees. I mean, I was disappointed that they were fake, but they had this whole natural setting. So they're bringing nature in. So you can do that as well. Plants. I mean, research shows that if you have plants within the office, you're going to boost your creativity by about 38%. Boost productivity by something similar, and it also reduces staff absenteeism as well. What's fascinating is, especially within men, it really reduces the stress levels within men of having office or plants in the office. So there's all these little things that you can do that actually aren't that complicated. And again, it's that little baby steps. You don't have to go and relocate to the forest. How can you just make it a bit easier and make people aware of it? And how do you have the conversations? Because again, it's because nature is being seen as historic, or that word that you used, I don't know if I pronounced it rightly.
Esoteric.
Esoteric, that was it, thank you. I knew I'd said it wrong there. And because it's kind of seen as this weird thing, it's also got a stigma of being a bit hippie and a bit woo-woo. People don't talk about the experiences that they have. And this is one of the things that I've done on the podcast as well. Asked people and said, so what, do you have a favourite memory of a time and place in nature, and how has it impacted you? Every single person has a fantastic story. And again, we've stopped talking about this, but sitting, and even before we came in here, standing outside and there's bird songs and there's trees and the blue sky, and it's awesome. That moment of even acknowledging it, that gives permission for people to go, oh yeah. And simply, what I've found as well is, the more people talk about nature, especially the more I talk to them about it, the more they start noticing nature, the more they start automatically spending time in nature, because we have this innate drive that wants us to connect anyway. So it's making it all right. And just having the conversation. What did you do? Well, I went to the golf course and I saw this really awesome tree. So, you know I was supposed to be playing golf, but actually I spent 5 minutes looking at the tree because there was just something really fantastic about it. And how do we make that a normal part of a conversation, rather than, oh, you're a bit of a hippie then because you're looking at the tree?
Yeah. Which really is how I think a lot of people are now conditioned to be.
Yes.
Which is
the tree hugger. That's where it comes from, isn't it? But
and even there, the evidence shows that reduces stress and does all this wonderful things and connects you and whatnot.
I suppose it's the negative connotation and association that now goes with that, which is a real shame.
Do you think getting the benefits and the stats out then will make people stop? Because everyone's in such a busy to-do thing. I've got to get around my 9 holes of golf or whatever, because then I've got lunch and I've got a meeting afterwards and stuff, whereas actually if the benefits really sold to them, you would...
I think it's, if you show them little ways, but also some people do need the evidence to back it up, and that's part of what I've found. Some people are just like, oh, I'm out into nature, I don't care about the evidence, it just makes me feel good, and other people want to know just a little bit more. Well, what are those benefits really? Because I've never really thought about them. And to date, there's like 67 benefits that have been researched, and that's scientific studies, and goes from everything to reducing mortality, diabetes, recovering from illness quicker. I mean, there's all this, community impact, psychological well-being, physical well-being, that when you're kind of made aware of that, it does make it a bit easier. You mean all I need to do is go and sit outside and this is going to happen. I mean, it kind of makes it a no-brainer, because I mean, the fundamental truth is, when we keep it really simple, I doubt there's a person listening to this show that could turn around and say that they don't feel good outside.
I'd have to agree. And it's funny that you should say that, because that's one of the things I've got written down, is the 67 scientifically studied benefits, which you shared on the introductory episode of your sustainability podcast. I've got to ask you this. You mentioned in that that there's people that have contacted you because they saw a cockroach. And you've got a story about cockroaches, so you have to tell us what the story is. So
the story about the cockroach.
I'm a bit nervous now.
It's a nice story. Don't worry. So not the last time, But one of the times that I came back from Spain, I went to my grand's house and I was sitting in the house with my gran and my mum, and I opened up my laptop to show them something, and out jumps this cockroach. And I'm like, ah! So my mum and my gran are, quick, kill it, kill it, kill it. I'm like, no, you can't kill it. Clearly, it's significant if this cockroach has come all the way from Spain in my luggage, in my laptop bag. So I got it into a glass container and put it into a jar. Now, I spent a lot of time connecting with this cockroach, and you can take it with a pinch of salt. Maybe I'm just talking to myself and hearing things. Maybe there really is such a thing as communication. I mean, I'm open to both perspectives. But I ended up having a bit of a dialogue with this cockroach that I ended up calling Rochi. And as I did a bit of research as well to find out more about cockroaches, they're actually highly intelligent animals. They're very much social animals. And I thought, wow, so all of this. So I'd kind of made him this, I bought a little house and put dirt in and food and stuff, you know, but he didn't look as if he was eaten. And I got this sense, or I imagined, or maybe the cockroach did say to me, if you're going to keep me in solitary confinement, I would rather die. And I was like, okay, right. That's a bit. And I mean, that's my translation of it, because again, nature is non-verbal. So I mean, I'm putting my own language onto it. And I was going back out to France just in a month's time. So I made a pact with this cockroach that I would put it in my luggage and I would take it out to France. So this is what I did. I put them in made little holes, you know, it was a little like tub, took them all the way out, all the way to France, and arrived there and put him out in this wooden pile. You know, and by this point, obviously, I've developed an attachment to this cockroach. And I put him out, I didn't see him, and I was sitting there one night and I was worrying and I was going, oh my God, you know, I'm really worried about Rochi. I wonder if he's still alive. I hope, do you think he's managed to make friends? You know, all this stuff. And then I'm sitting in this, because I was house sitting with a friend. So I'm sitting on Skype in the living room, and then all of a sudden I noticed this gold thing on the ground, and I'm talking to a friend on Skype. I'm like, that's weird, that looks like a gold cockroach. Anyway, I keep on going. The next second, this cockroach jumps up onto the laptop, and I'm like, what, get off. So then the cockroach goes round back and then jumps up onto the table. And by this stage, it's like, okay, this is clearly something going on, because, you know, I mean, we could maybe think that, you know, I'm a bit of a crazy person talking to cockroaches, but the fact that this cockroach has done all this jumping stuff. And I had to go and research, because again, I like going and researching, you know, it's that balance of Google is fantastic for researching nature. So I get on and find there is such a thing as a golden cockroach. And it is very common in this area of France. But the most interesting thing about this cockroach is that it does not live in houses. It actually lives out in woods and forests, where I actually put Rochi. So, and by the time I research all this, you know, my friend's still on the phone, the cockroach is gone. And as far as I'm concerned, the meaning that I have made from that experience is that Rochi found some new friends, and he sent one of them along to let me know that he was all right, because he knew that I was worrying about him. So this is my cockroach story, and obviously after this, but I mean, I have then ended up in New York with cockroaches in the bathroom, but only on the first night. You know, I'm like, oh, the cockroaches have come to say hello, because they signify survival, they're very durable. Yeah. You know, so for me, it's this sign of tenacity, and those moments that I'm doubting myself, oh, there's a cockroach, it's all right, I'm going to get through this. And obviously, once I share this story, the person in question reached out and says, yeah, I got freaked out last night because there was this cockroach crawling across my wall. After I calmed down, I realised that it made me think of you and I should maybe reach out and get in touch. And I was like, well, okay. And then, then as his story developed, I was like, I hope it doesn't mean it's bad that the cockroach is now squashed and down the toilet. Like, well, you know, I mean, because again, we've been conditioned to have this response to cockroaches. They're bad, again, you know, negative connotations, that it takes a bit of time to be able to recognize, well, this is actually just a living natural being that's part of the earth just like me, and you know, fundamentally there's no difference. I'm just this two-legged, two-hand bigger creature, and that's just this bug that has actually been around a lot longer than me in terms of evolution. So that's my cockroach story.
That's brilliant. Such a good story.
I wasn't expecting that at all. I'll never look at a cockroach the same again.
Believe me, I have all sorts of weird stories related to animals, and even like the latest one just in Spain there. I always like crickets, because crickets are a symbol of leaping forward, because when you take that huge jump, you leap forward further than everybody else. Yes. So one had already jumped on the window of the car the first day that I arrived there, and it was like, okay, that's interesting. And then on my last night, we went into the plaza, and they were having this festival of stonemasonry, so everything was going on, and the next second this huge, and I mean we're talking big grasshopper, kind of like lies, and it's trying to get out of this busy square filled with people, and it's not doing a very successful job. And I'm looking down at it, and I watch as this little girl just about stands on it. I'm like, oh God, I can't leave this grasshopper here, because if I leave it, it's going to end up getting squashed, because somebody's just going to come along and go. And it was funny because I could feel, for whatever reason, it was like, oh, I've got to go and pick it up. I was like, God, this is me. I teach this stuff and I'm having this weird reaction. But anyway, I went down, because again, how do you pick these things up without damaging them? Because you don't know how strong, how soft they are, because we've not been exposed to them. It's not normal that they're crawling around. So anyway, I bent down and I put my hands to either side, and you know, like the line from Terminator, come with me if you want to live. So I do this, and lo and behold, this grasshopper crawls onto my arm. So I'm walking along the square, getting a bit of a weird look, because I've got this huge grasshopper there, but I take it over into a garden and put it down and put it safe. And it was just weird, because I could feel like the imprint of, you know, like feeling its little legs on my arm still afterwards. And for me, it's like, well, that's great. There's a quantum leap coming, and that grasshopper let me know. And, you know, that was this moment of connection and kinship and bonding with this grasshopper that, you know, just made me feel all nice inside.
Brilliant.
It's amazing. Absolutely amazing. Okay, so back to maybe a slightly more mundane question. How would you rate Scotland in terms of sustainability, and what are the things we could be doing to make this better?
It's hard to answer this question, because I am biased, because I think Scotland is awesome. One of the reasons, apart from being told to come back to Scotland, is that there seems to be a shift happening within Scotland in terms of being an incredibly progressive country, incredibly ambitious country, with plans and goals to make it sustainable, to make it renewable energy, to really drive through a different way of being. So for me, there's something really exciting happening that I don't think we're kind of quite aware of just within Scotland, of just how much is going on and just how much is being done. And, you know, we have governmental support. You know, we've got bold, ambitious plans for governments coming in. I think, was it when I was listening to Nicola Sturgeon, she was saying that, was it last year, most trees planted in the whole of the UK was in Scotland. So I mean, we're doing a lot of stuff in terms of reforestation. When I've shared this with my team members in the States, they're like, oh my God, like this is what's going on in Scotland. I mean, it really impresses people in the States. I had somebody else that I spoke to that was like, as far as I'm concerned, Scotland is now the mecca of sustainability.
Wow.
So whether or not that's true, but that's the perception that people have when they're hearing about it. And I think this is to be encouraged, you know, because we are a small country, there's only 5 million people. Logistically, it makes it far easier for us to do stuff. When I've been speaking to like people on the podcast and everything, and hearing just other bits and bobs that are going on in places, there's networks set up. People from different different councils are communicating. There's all these, I mean, it really is. I mean, it's like a forest. As I map out and as I find more and more people to interview, I mean, I'm creating this visual forest in my head. There is a well-grown forest of sustainability already in Scotland. And what we need to do is we need to encourage more people to recognise what's actually happening, because again, it's that part of feeling belonging to something, that sense of belonging. And the more people in Scotland that know about sustainability, so for me it comes down to communication. How can we communicate it? How can we share what's going on? How can we inspire and encourage other people to do this? That for me is the first and most important thing, because you're never going to guilt and shame anybody into doing anything. We already know that doesn't work. So it is a case of how can we create more dialogues? How can you then share what you're doing? How can you make it a conversation? And I think I've recorded about 16 interviews already, because I've got them batched ahead.
Jeez, did you not start them in May?
Yeah, I only launched them last week.
Oh my word, okay. Wow. Jeez.
That's my overachiever bit coming in. I wanted to have a bank of getting it in and getting a sense of what was going on. And one of the questions that I asked everybody that I've interviewed so far is like, what is the most important resource that we have, or that you have, in terms of companies? And we can apply this not just to companies but to people as well. So many people turn around and says, well, it's actually people. The most important resource is people communicating and sharing things and actually inspiring and encouraging and educating other people. And for me, I think that is the key as well. How do we just keep on creating the dialogue? How do we show that it is those baby steps? It's not that let's go live in a cave and, you know, change everything dramatically, but what's the one thing that you can do? And for me, I mean, I even work on that principle as well. Well, what's the one thing that you're really passionate about? So if you're really passionate about makeup, how can you go and find sustainable makeup? Because there's companies out there that make sustainable products. If you're really into your shoes, how can you go and buy sustainable shoes? How about your clothes? Where do you think about that? And it's just making those one steps at a time, because one step, you know, it's like one bit of snow then becomes another bit of snow that then becomes another bit of snow that then makes this huge big snowball that you can throw at somebody.
Is there some kind of research there? So see, even if I thought that's the one thing I had to do, it was just have sustainable shoes, and that was my thing, that because I'm really into shoes and that's what I'm going to do. Is there a whole subconscious thing going on where, again, it then makes me connect more with nature because I've planted that seed, pardon the pun there, but
it's all right, we can talk about nature puns all
you've got stacks of them, haven't you? You just keep throwing them back at me and I'll get lost quickly. But so does that have an impact, basically? Does it have this domino effect in how we want to engage with nature?
You know something, that's a really, really good question. In terms of research, I'm not kind of quite sure. What I've observed and what I've seen is the more that people become conscious of one thing, it does have a bit of a roll-on effect, that then it'll, oh, what else can I do? How else can I go? And then people will start searching and finding out more. So I mean, it's almost like that first step in your sustainable shoes puts you on the journey to finding out more and becoming more curious about it. The research behind that, I'm not quite sure.
Cool.
So now's probably a good time to ask you some of your, so I suppose, success secrets. Although I'm not sure that you'll see many of your successes as success, but it'll be interesting to get your views on some of these. So, who or what inspires you?
Who or what inspires me?
Not Roche.
What?
I said not Roche.
Not Roche. Well, apart from nature, I mean, nature is my biggest source of inspiration, so we'll move that out. Who really inspires me is actually Tupac Shakur.
Wow. That's the least likely answer.
Least likely answer. Well,
he's a poet though, isn't he, really?
Oh, I mean, I absolutely adore him. And I only discovered him after he died, you know, when Changes came out and I was about 18 and whatever, but there was just something about the depth and the complexity of what he was talking about, because here, you know, here am I, this little white girl from rural Scotland that's just moved to Edinburgh at that point and going, God, 500,000 people in the city of Edinburgh, this is big. And here's this, you know, young black guy from the other side of the world talking about the same things that I'm struggling with of, wait a minute, why is there inequality and why is there injustice and everything? And that was what connected to me. And as you go and you find out more about him, yeah, he wrote poetry and, you know, he studied all this dramatic stuff, studied ballet, you know, really intelligent, intellectual person. And for me, there was just something that I think that was the first person that resonated with me, that I can remember, that has still stayed with me, you know. And I mean, when I'm going through a difficult time, I will still go back to his music, because there's a certain element of fire, you know. And as I was going through my granddad's death, well, what did I do? I went back and binged on Tupac Shakur for like days to kind of just listen and process all that stuff. So I mean, he's been a huge influence in my life.
Amazing. Cool. Didn't see that coming. So what are your main goals at the moment? What are the main things you're working on and looking to achieve?
For the rest of my life, or in a time frame?
Yeah, that's a good counter question. I like that.
What's what's that big
one
for you?
The big one.
Yeah, we'll do that.
The life's mission.
No.
God, can I articulate this? So, I kind of want to almost quote Martin Luther King. So I have a dream. Well, I do. I have a dream. I have a dream that one day humanity and the earth will live in balance and will be connected, interconnected. That nature and the earth will be represented in every single aspect of human practice, policy, procedures, that we will really have this collaborative relationship and live in harmony with that. So for me, I suppose that is my life's work of how can I help facilitate this. And using, you know, the 4 triangles of Earthself. I mean, there is Earthself that has got the nature-centered approach to organizational management. I want to see how far, obviously, I can take that. I mean, I'm already training people up in that as well, so that they can use the methodology that I use within that. It's how can I take the nature process to have it trained, to have it brought into communities, into schools, into businesses. Within that, my passion project that I haven't started yet is how do you use nature to heal trauma? Because that's my own personal story and judgment. And you know, we have a planet that's traumatized. We have humans that are traumatized, especially by war. You know, for men it's stereotypically war, for women it's domestic violence. How can we actually heal that? That's my belief, that that's what's holding us back from really being able to evolve as a species and as a planet collectively. So I want to do that. Then I have the stuff that I am doing with my second master's, which is in consciousness, spirituality and transpersonal psychology. So I want to be a combination of Freud, Jung and Ken Wilber, but far cooler, and basically write a lot of theories that will help shift what are the practices that we need to use in terms of the human psyche, how can this go out into business, so to really take the ideas and I suppose build a bridge and lay a map within ideas, practical frameworks that people can use and adopt to help them become more nature-centered, while also inspiring, because what I've found as well is there's so many people who love the nature aspect of it but don't like the business aspect of it. So how can you create, in effect, an ecosystem like a forest where you can have it set up so all the people who want to, you know, teach wilderness skills or do herb stuff, they can be put together in a proper functioning business, because it's one of the things that I see holding so many people back. They don't actually have the business skills, they don't have the drive and the desire to get out there into the world. And for me, there is another aspect of Earthself that we want to develop in the future, where we can create this interconnected relationship and actually help all these people who are reconnecting us back to the earth to get out there in the way that they want. So I mean, there will be more books, there will be whatever else, communities, goodness knows, but I mean, literally I want to transform the world or dominate the world, whatever one. I mean, nature wants to dominate the world again, and
so in order to achieve that massive vision and goal, you'll need an enormous amount of momentum in order to do that. So how far along are you on your, I suppose, key person of influence status, if you like, in order to make that happen? And additionally, how much growth do you think is required in Earthself as an organisation in order to make this happen?
I kind of feel that I'm sitting at like 2 or 3%,
Oh,
which
right.
might be true, might be not. But I mean, I'm seeing with this end goal in mind. And I mean, I know from a conversation that I had with a friend, I mean, she's like, well, you seem so far along and you've got this reach and this impact and this influence. And I'm like, yes, but I'm only here and I want to go here. And it takes a lot longer. So, I mean, do I have a level of credibility already? Yes, I've spent 5 years building this credibility. Is it where it's going to be to take Earthself to where it wants to go? No, because I mean, I need to be working with bigger and bigger companies, getting more case studies, getting more success stories. I also need to be training people at the same time. And I think for me, in order to get to that level of key person of influence where I want, I mean, I'm in the process of, I'm building a team just now, which has literally only happened in, I would say, about the last, what was September, so wherever we are, last 6-7 months, that I've started getting this team together, that I'm training people and really getting them to support me. And it's, how do you allow all this to happen within, you know, the way that nature wants to do it, rather than the way that's in traditional business as well. So, so having said that, I'm probably not only at 3 or 4%. I'm probably a bit further ahead, but I mean, it still feels so far away with the goals that I've got. But I mean, I have, you know, it's like when I say those goals, I mean, that's kind of, I've worked on the premise of, if you've ever done that exercise, like you're on your deathbed and you're going to die. What do you want to have achieved with your life? And you know,
what's your obituary type?
Well, that's it. And I factored into the fact that, you know, we're living longer. So I'm like, God, do you think I could manage to 200 years? What could I achieve in 200 years? Like, wow, okay, so I might do all this, you know, and I mean, I've got books piling out in my head that I'm like, God, I want to write that book, I want to write that book, I want to write that book. Oh, I do want to go and do this. And it's kind of bringing it all down and learning that it is this step-by-step process. So maybe I'm 10-15% of the way along, rather than 3. I think I've maybe underestimated it, but there's still a long way to go. But what I'm perceiving in terms of growth is, what I've noticed is the hardest part about building any business, and I mean, it will be interesting to see if you guys agree with this, or with me with this, it always takes far longer than you think to start up.
3 or 4 times as long as what you
need far more money than you think you need. It never goes in plan A. You have to go to about plan Z or something, and then you move forward. But then there is that moment where it starts hitting critical mass and it starts accelerating. And for me, where I'm really seeing, like both with the nature process and with Earthself, there is a critical mass point which is coming within the next year. I mean, I can feel it because I've been working towards it so long, and then who knows what's going to happen after that critical mass point.
How long do you see yourself as the driver behind Earthself? Once it hits that mass and this great big momentum starts to go, is there a point where you let go, or do you keep charging it?
When I let go. I mean, I have already, it's really interesting, because when people talk about, oh, this is my passion and I want to do it forever, and I'm like, no, I want to get this to where it can go, to then hand over to somebody who will actually be able to take it to the next level. Because where I want Earthself to go, where I want the nature process to go, I will be able to take it so far, and then I know that I'm going to have to get other people to come in. And for me, I mean, I have a plan, because then that's when I get to step back, that's when I get to go and maybe spend more time in the countryside, and I have a secret dream of maybe getting into politics as well. But not until I'm in my 50s or 60s. I don't know if that's too old or not. We'll wait and we'll see.
Not if you're going to live till 100. Just like a baby,
so,
then, aren't you?
So, well, in psychological terms, they say that you're a young adult until you're 40. And see, when I read that, I was like, yes! I'm not even an adult. I'm just a young adult. I've got plenty of time. So, yeah. And I mean, I think that's the whole thing of keeping it going. So, I mean, definitely, I mean, I was talking about this just with my coach just last week. There is a point where I just want to walk away from this. I want to start it up, get the momentum going, and then get the right people in. Because, I mean, I'm lucky enough that I am single at this precise moment. I have no children, so I can give it 100%. But obviously, should it happen that I end up with a family and kids, I'm not going to be able to give the time and energy that I'm giving to it just now. And if that experience happens to me, I want to be able to enjoy that experience rather than trying to juggle too many things at a time. So I mean, there's all of those things that I'm thinking about, because the speed that I've gone at is not, I mean, it's not been a sustainable speed, to be honest. So I mean, one of the things which I find quite ironic is that people sometimes say, well, you teach the thing that you need to know most. Well, I'm learning a lot about being sustainable, because if my health is getting out of balance, then that's not sustainable. So for me, sustainability within me, never mind my businesses, that's a huge lesson for me that I'm learning at this precise moment as well.
When I was down in London earlier in the year, I was attending one of Daniel Priestley's KPI conferences, and I had the pleasure of meeting Paul Dunn, who's the chairman of B1G1.
Yes.
It's buy one, give one. It's an incredible charity that's been set up so that when somebody buys like a television in a country, somebody else in another like third world country will get water, or you know, it's that sort of concept. How did your affiliation with B1G1 come about?
Another random story. So there was a woman that I'd vaguely known on Facebook and online that was doing an event in London, and I had absolutely no attraction to going to it. And then, however it happened, her and I ended up having a conversation. I thought, I just have to go to London to be at your event. And Paul Dunn was speaking, because he was also partnering with her. And I have heard Paul speak, and I mean, Paul is just an incredibly inspiring man who is in his 70s, has more energy than me at this precise stage, and goes out running and does all this incredible stuff. And he was there, and it was one of those things where I heard him speak, and I was just like, I hate those moments where you hear people speak and you're just like, oh, damn, I'm going to have to give somebody money. And I know you should always give money gratefully, you know, but in those early stages, you know, you're kind of like lurching back and forward going, you've got enough money? Nope. And it goes, and it's up and down. And I heard him speak, and he made an offer to join B1G1, and I was just like, oh, I can do this. So that was the start of that. And, you know, it's something that I'm really glad that I've done. I mean, it's obviously it's not been utilised to its full maximum potential, but when I do products and services and whatever else, I do have this, you know, so like one client, I just recently sent her a thing where it was like, well, great, so thanks for working with me. You've now provided, I think it was 10 food gardens for children in Cambodia, so that they can learn all about how to grow their own food and have that whole nature experience. And I think for me the best part is, it's how do we make it easy to show people that making a difference, we don't have to go and live in caves, we can do small things that have a huge impact. And I mean, that was the key motivation even behind the nature process as well. If you're going to connect to nature and get a benefit, well, I want to make it easy for you to see that that work that you're doing there is having a positive impact. So you're helping other women become more empowered, and you're reforesting the planet, and all you have to do is buy the program. I mean, this is how simple things can be if we just make those switches. So it's, you know, hugely important, and I just adore B1G1, and I'm really glad to actually be a part of what they're doing.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely fantastic. It's brilliant, and listening to Paul talk and his energy and his delivery, he's such a showman. It's just absolutely brilliant.
I've learned
Can't help but buy into
so many good things just from listening to him. And he's like got little tricks, and I'm like, oh, that's such a good idea.
So how do you define success?
That's a very good question. Obviously, success is not what everybody else tells you it is. And I struggle with that, because at times I feel successful and times I don't feel successful. So it's an interesting one. But I mean, for me, success is, am I able to get up in the morning and do what I want to do? Yes. Do I have something that I can't think of myself doing anything else? Well, yes. Am I able to take control and allow it? Will take control. I mean, I don't take control of it. Nature takes control of it. But am I able to be guided by nature? Yes. Am I able to discover who I am and explore more of myself? Yes. So, I mean, all of that ties in. Success for me is really closely tied with privilege, because I mean, I feel really privileged to be able to do this. And that for me is kind of like the success. I have freedom that not everybody else has, and it's something that I've been kind of quite conscious of. And so I suppose success, all of that, success is freedom.
Okay.
That's how I would define it.
And so does that transcend kind of financial well-being, if you like?
Not really, because I mean, an area I would like to be more successful in is financially, but as much work as I've done on my money is not a huge motivating driving factor for me. And thanks to my mum and my gran, I do know how to make a small amount of money go long ways. So I'm quite happy doing that. And for me, you know, they always say you should pay yourself first. And I'm like, well, I'm paying myself and I want to do this for my business. Oh yeah, I need to buy some food today. That's okay. So, I mean, that's a part that I'm still learning, because obviously I'm working on that one. But it's not just only financial success, because if I was saying that success is financial, then I wouldn't consider myself successful at all. I mean, I'm not broke, but I'm certainly not able to go and have a big house and a car, but not that I want a big house and a big car, unless it was an Earthship and a Tesla car, and then I could justify that one. But it is more than just the financial stuff, but definitely let's not negate it. I mean, let's not say, no, we don't need money and whatever, because we fundamentally do. I mean, it's an incredibly useful tool.
Yeah, it's true. What's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Ooh, best piece of advice? That's fascinating. I honestly don't know. Like, nothing is coming to mind, because there's been so many good pieces of advice, and I think the best piece of advice that I've ever had is the thing that I've needed to hear at the right moment that's helped me further along my path. So I have had immense amounts of good advice that have been right in that moment and at that time. But one of them that has stood out as a guiding principle that really moves me forward, no.
Interesting.
When you're picking up advice from cockroaches and crickets and stars, must be hard to remember who gave you that bit of advice and what it was.
Well, that combined with all the books that I read as well, you know, and all the people that I listen to, yes.
Obviously, that's a hard question if you don't know it's coming, because you know, probably something will pop out later on.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just.
Well, it's interesting what you say there, because that right piece of advice at the wrong time might not be the greatest piece of advice.
No, it has to be that right piece of advice at the right time. You know, and I mean, you know what that piece of advice is, because you hear it and you go, and you have a physical response to it, and you're like, frick, yeah, it's the one thing that I needed to hear. And, you know, I mean, for me, it has that response where I'm like, ooh, okay, right. And that just puts me on my path.
Yeah. I've not asked this question to anyone else on Edinburgh Reel thus far, but I think you're a good person to ask. How do you think people can raise their level of consciousness?
That's a very good one. How do I think that people can raise their level of consciousness? My blunt answer is by clearing out their crap. So all the things that you don't want to face, all the negative emotions, all the uncomfortable feelings that you'd rather not go there, those are the things, it's like going through them is the way that you can actually move forward and raise your level of consciousness. That's certainly been true in my experience. I know that it's true for all the clients that I've worked with. And even from a research perspective, I would say there's so much stuff about that, and you know, how we can, when we're trying to work on becoming more spiritual, raising our level of consciousness, we can end up spiritually bypassing stuff, which is an unconscious process. But what fundamentally it means is not acknowledging that stuff that really is there to act as a catalyst for our growth and for our transformation. So yeah, go face your fears, have your dark night of the soul, sit and let all the crap fall away. And if you're like Buddha, you can sit under a tree, which is pretty cool. You know, and that, I mean, that's what he did. He got to know all his worst parts. And yeah, it seems to be what works. And even for those people who use ayahuasca, that's what ayahuasca does. It makes you face all the stuff that you don't want to face. And you don't need to take ayahuasca to go and face all the stuff that you don't want to face. You can just take the time and do the work yourself. But that's the most important thing. And I mean, it ties into, that's why I want to set up the foundation and really heal trauma within people with PTSD, because that's that dark stuff that can be incredibly scary to go through. And I know from my experiences of, it's always better if you have support. I mean, don't ever do what I did. It's one of those things. Don't ever think that you can handle it yourself and go into all your dark stuff and whatever else, unless you want to shave your hair off and end up, in a psychiatric hospital. And that was my first lesson. So after that, I kind of realised, let's get a bit of help and support for this. And that's it, get support, realise that you're not alone on this journey, and yeah, do the dark stuff and realise. I mean, I actually have a tattoo of what is a raven, but it turned out to be a baby blackbird. But it symbolises for me that sometimes we have to go into the darkness to bring forth the light, and that is probably the best piece of advice that I have ever had, because whenever I am struggling, that's the bit that I always go back to. Sometimes you need to go into the darkness to find the light, and that has always guided me on my path.
Wow. So this is probably one that we can edit out if you're not comfortable with it being on tape, but have you had much experience with kind of psychedelics or ayahuasca? Have you used any of that?
In my 20s, in my wonderful times, I would go and I would take a lot of ecstasy in nightclubs. What I would do though is, which I didn't realise until afterwards, I'd go and sit in the toilet, everybody else would be on the dance floor, and I'd be doing spiritual work. But I didn't know it was spiritual work at the time until I was like, oh. I tried ayahuasca once and I wasn't impressed, simply because I can go out to nature and have that exact same experience by being present in nature, that to go and take a drug that then means I have to vomit, which I didn't vomit when I tried it, but then go and be on something that has no end, that you just have to really surrender to. Well, I like nature because it's far softer and far gentler, and nature will not take you any place that you're not uncomfortable to go. And I mean, I've had some pretty cool experiences, like where I've thought I was going to die by climbing down trees because, I connected, and that was part of the guiding of it. So, but I mean, I have that kind of personality where I'll push myself in the moment to take educated risks, not blind risks. So for me, I mean, I've never done ayahuasca again, and I don't particularly feel the need, because I know that I can go for a walk in the woods and have the exact same experience. But then I'm also aware that not everybody can do that. But that's
exactly.
That's one of the things that I like about
but
the
through a
process
of what you're teaching, I'm sure you can.
Exactly,
Can't you?
And it's softer, it's more subtle. I mean, if you're the person that really needs the dramatic woohoo, bang, bang, slap, 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 if that's what you need, go and take psychedelics. If you're able to actually work with it in a far more gentler, subtler way, which also, because you can go and you can do ayahuasca, and then if you don't integrate it, I mean, it's been a bit of a pointless experience.
It's a story to tell, isn't it?
Yeah, nothing.
That's a big thing about it.
Nothing more, and that really irritates me. It's like, don't say that you've gone and done the work, or that you're now a shaman and experienced because you've gone and taken ayahuasca 3 times or more.
It's becoming very designer, isn't it?
Well, it's this cool thing, and I'm always wary when anything's cool. And
especially something like that, because you're going to get a fright if you think you're going for a party in the jungle.
And it's got its dark side as well. I mean, because obviously there's tourism and money's coming in. I mean, there are stories of unscrupulous shamans over there that people are being killed and whatnot. So I mean, everything's got its dark side, and there are subtler, softer ways. And what I've found as well is, as I've stepped deeper and deeper and deeper into my growth, and my clients have kind of been shocked at this one as well, things get more subtle and more gentle. So there's deep, powerful shifts, but they're so subtle that they're like, really? Oh, is this it? The drama of it almost dies down because you don't need it. And I think I once read in a book which was really interesting, and it was saying basically the people in the East, I don't know if that's East, but people in the East, I know where I'm looking at, the people in the East, they will become enlightened, but they will not stay there because they don't recognise it. Whereas the people in the West will get so caught up in the experiences that they will forget that the aim of the goal is enlightenment. And I think, you know, I see a lot of that, people getting caught up in experiences and going, wow, this is so cool. But are you remembering what is the goal of doing spiritual work? I mean, why are you doing it? If it's just for cool experiences, well, you know, you're not really doing and facing that dark part of your soul and shifting and reaching that higher level of consciousness. You know, it's another way of distracting yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree with that. But it could, if it's a tool on top of all that work as well, that's just a little boost, you know, that mirrors up everywhere to reflect on you, and then you're still in that process of working, then great. But
yeah, totally. And I mean, that's it. If you can use it as a tool and really do the work, and it speaks to you, then why not?
Yeah. Okay, so one from Brian Rose. If you could make a phone call to the 20-year-old you, what would you say?
If I could make a phone call to the 20-year-old Tabi, what would I say? I wonder where I was when I was 20. Probably just say, you know, everything's going to work out okay. Don't worry, I've got this handled. Your future 37-year-old self. Whether or not that's true, but you know, compared to being 20, I've definitely got this handled. So yeah, that's what I would say.
Awesome.
Cool.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah. That's everything from me. That's been pretty fascinating. The way that, you know, you go into detail and your candor, which I appreciate so much, to describe, you know, the events that happened to you, and the way in which I suppose you've overcome such huge adversity and achieved so much. And I think you can genuinely be proud of yourself that you have been successful.
Well done.
Even if it's only 2% along the way.
Exactly. 2's better than 0.
No,
but it's a huge
definitely.
2% if that's what it is, you know.
No, thank you. I mean, I appreciate that, and yeah, I just hope that whatever I've shared also inspires somebody else to go and take that step forward on their journey as well.
Absolutely. I think from my side of things, to hear of someone who's been through major trauma, but then to hear you speak and the energy, the passion you have, there's very few people that I've met with that level of energy and passion about what they do. So, you know, you've obviously transformed that, you know, you've taken that real hit of negative energy and you're transforming it into just releasing it into doing good, you know, doing greater for the earth. It's making me realise how bloody lazy I am, that kind of thing. Made me feel ashamed of myself, but inspired me as well to do more.
But we don't want to take the shame, you know, take that away.
But no, it's been really inspiring just listening to that and hearing the energy behind it and the passion behind it.
Awesome, thank you.
Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Tabi, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. I've enjoyed myself immensely.
Brilliant. I'm glad. All right. Cheers.
Cheers.